Long ago, there lived an old mother with her 3 sons, and she would sew beautiful brocades made of silk. And she would sell these pictures in the market in exchange for food, rice. She made enough money to feed her 3 sons. But one day, as she was returning from the market, she saw a painting that was unlike anything she had seen before. A painting of a house in a garden. A house with red roof tiles. A garden with a running brook. Flowers of many colours. Fruit trees. And she loved this painting. And when she got home, she told her sons that she was going to buy it. Her 2 older sons tried to prevent her, but her younger son said, "Mother, if you will have this painting, buy it." And she bought the painting, and she said to her eldest son, "I wish to live in a house like this." And her eldest son said, "Not in this life, mother." And she said to her second son, "I want to live in this house." "Only in your dreams, mother." And she said to her youngest son, "This is the house where I must be." And the youngest son said, "Mother, you can, for you weave such beautiful brocades. Make this brocade, and it will be as if you live in this house." And she took the very little money that was left, and the next day in the marketplace she bought silken threads of many colours, and she brought them home and began to sew that brocade. Well, it took time. Days passed, and the older brothers said to their mother, "Mother, what about the food that we need to eat? For you spend all night and all day sewing this one brocade." But the younger brother said, "Leave her. This is what she must do. Come with me, brothers, and we will go into the forest and collect firewood, and we will exchange it for rice in the marketplace." But the 2 older brothers refused. And the younger brother worked alone. Every day he would collect firewood and exchange it for rice. And every day his old mother would be sewing that beautiful brocade. Days and weeks and months passed. The family were getting hungry. The older brothers more impatient. After a year, there was no more oil to light the lamps. And the old woman was working by the light of the fire made by the firewood that her youngest son had collected, and the smoke was in her eyes, and tears fell, and where the tears fell, she wove the bubbling brook in the garden in the brocade. More weeks and months passed, and at the end of 2 years, the smoke was so harsh that blood dropped from her eyes onto the brocade, and there she wove the red fruit in the trees, and there she wove the setting sun behind the house and the red tiles of the roof. After 3 years, the brocade was finished. But the woman now was old and weak, for she had eaten very poorly and all the time stooped over that sewing. And her younger son carried her into the sunlight. And the older sons took the brocade and they unfolded it, and it billowed and was beautiful, and they saw there in the brocade the animals that danced in the fields, the fish that leapt in the babbling brook. They saw the trees with their bright red fruit, the gate of the garden golden. But as it billowed in the wind, a sudden gust carried that brocade high into the air and away towards the east. And the 3 brothers ran and leapt and tried to catch the brocade, but each time another gust carried it further, until away, 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 and it was gone. The old woman wept and said to her eldest son, "Bring me back the brocade. I cannot do without it." And the eldest son, he put on his boots and he walked towards the east. For 2 months he walked, until he came to a cave, and at the entrance to that cave there sat an old woman with long white hair, and at the entrance to the cave there grew a bush of red berries, and next to the bush was a stone horse. And the old woman said, "I know why you're here. You are looking for your mother's brocade." "Tell me where it is, old woman." "The maidens of the island of the sun have taken it. It is far, far away. To get there will be the hardest task. You will have to break your teeth and put them in the mouth of the stone horse, and feed the horse 10 red berries, and then the horse will carry you over the fire mountain and through the frozen eastern sea, and you must not flinch or cry out. But even if you get to the island of the sun, it will be the hardest task to bring back that brocade. You can do this, or..." And she went into the cave and returned with an iron box. "Or take this box of gold." And he opened the box of gold, and it shone, glittering gold inside. He took the box, and he set off back towards his home. But after a short time, he thought, this gold will be enough for one to find his fortune. And he went with that gold and changed direction and went towards the city. And a long time the old woman waited, and her eldest son did not return. So she said to her second son, "Go, my child. Go and find my brocade. I cannot live without it." And she was getting so weak now, that poor old mother, that the second son pulled on his boots and he walked towards the east. And he walked how long?
2 months.
And after 2 months he came to that cave, and there sitting outside the cave was an old woman with long white hair. "I know why you're here. You are looking for your mother's brocade, but it was taken by the maidens of the island of the sun." And she told him what he must do to ride through the mountain of fire and the frozen eastern sea. "But," and she went into her cave, "you could take this iron box of gold." And the second son opened the box, and after hearing all the challenges of the journey to the island of the sun, he made his choice and carried that box towards his home. But after a short time he thought, this box of gold is only enough for one to find his fortune. And he turned towards the city. The old woman was dying. She was so weak. And she called her youngest son to her bed. "Child, I cannot live. I must have the brocade. Mother, I cannot leave you. Who will feed you? Perhaps the neighbours will take care of me. My son, you must go." And he pulled on his boots and said farewell to his mother, but there were tears in his eyes, for he feared that his mother would die. And he walked towards the east for 2 months. And he came to that cave, and there sat the old woman with the long white hair, and there was the stone horse and the berry bush. "I know why you're here, child," and she explained what he must do to pull out and break his front teeth and put them in the stone horse's mouth. And without hesitation, when he heard what he must do, he picked up a stone and he broke his front teeth. And he pulled out his teeth and put them into the mouth of the stone horse. And he fed the stone horse 10 red berries from the bush. And the horse reared up, and it was a mighty horse. And he threw himself onto the back of the horse, and the horse rode off high, high, climbing and climbing, climbing to the top of the mountain of fire. And through the flames the horse rode, and the flames licked at the youngest son's legs until they scorched him. But did he cry out? No. And then down the other side the horse carried him, and into the frozen eastern sea, and the waves broke over him and froze him to the core. But did he cry out? And on he went, and through the frozen eastern sea, until he came to the shores of the island of the sun. And he rode up on those glittering shores to a palace of crystal. And there he got down from the horse and went inside, and there were 9 maidens, and each of them was sewing and copying his mother's brocade, which was there before them. "This is my mother's brocade. I must return it to her." O child, your mother. What art, what skill. This is the most beautiful thing that has ever been created. We are copying it. And when we have finished, you may take it. And how long will that be? Soon. And he sat and he waited. And they gave him the juice of fruit that he had never tasted before. And when it became dark, they set a green crystal into the roof of the palace. And it shone and illuminated the whole space and lit their copies. But even though they were so illuminated, they did not match the beauty of his mother's own brocade. He fell asleep in that place. And when he awoke, all was quiet. The 9 maidens had gone to rest. But before they had gone to rest, the youngest of those 9 maidens, she had gone up to that brocade that his mother had made, and she had sewed an image of herself in her beauty, with her long raven black hair and her green eyes. She had sewed an image of herself between the trees with the red fruit. And that young man, he saw that they were all gone, and he knew that he must get back to his mother before she died. And he rolled up that brocade and put it inside his shirt. And then he ran out of the palace and found the horse and leapt onto the horse, and the horse reared up and rode down to the shore of the island of the sun, and through the frozen eastern sea the horse galloped. And the waves crashed over him and froze him to his core, so he could not bear it. But did he flinch?
No.
Did he cry out?
No.
And on he went until he came to the slopes of the mountain of fire, and high, high, high he rode, and into the flames. And the flames licked and burned and scorched him. All over his body he was burning with pain and agony he burned. But did he cry out?
No.
And off he went down the slopes the other side until he came to the cave. And there was the old woman with the long white hair. And when she saw that he had returned with the brocade, she pulled the teeth from the horse, and the horse became stone again, and she replaced the teeth inside his mouth. And the horse was a frozen statue. And she gave him 2 pairs of slippers of straw. And he set off for home, and in 2 paces he was there. And he entered his mother's home, and there she was lying in her small bed. And she was as if dried out, so thin. And at first he thought indeed that she was dead. He brushed the hair from her face. Her eyes flickered. Mother, mother, I have brought the brocade. And she held up her hands, and he picked her up and carried her outside and into the sunlight. And there he opened the brocade, and the breeze opened the brocade. And as he stood there looking at it, it seemed to grow and expand, and there was the golden gate, and beyond the house. And the water was actually running in the babbling brook, and the fish were leaping, and the animals were frolicking in the fields. And he took his mother by the hand, and he opened the golden gate. He stepped inside that garden. And through the gardens they walked, and past the colourful flowers, and over the bridge and over the brook, and towards the grove of trees. And among the trees there stepped a maiden with long raven black hair and green eyes. "Who are you?" said the old woman. "I am the youngest of the 9 maidens of the island of the sun. And I wove myself into your brocade. For your brocade is the most beautiful thing that has ever been created. May I remain here with you?" And so it was that that maiden lived with the old woman and her youngest son in that fine garden. in that red-tiled palace, the animals frolicking in the gardens, the birds singing in the trees, and the ripe red fruit growing. And they lived well in that paradise. One day there came two men. They wore no shoes upon their feet. They dragged sticks behind them in the dust. And they came to that golden gate and looked through. You know who they were. And they saw their own brother and their own mother and that maiden. And although they wanted to enter, they knew that they could not.